interactive movie games like Uncharted or Half-Life or Metal Gear Solid are in and of themselves enough to justify video games being heralded as a unique and cool art form. And the other sort of end of that spectrum is people like John Blow, who made Brave, or Clint Hawkins, who's the creative director of Far Cry 2. On both of their blogs, they sort of rail against the idea that not necessarily that those games are valueless, but that in focusing so single-mindedly on Uncharted type games and Metal Gear Solid type games, you're missing out on this whole other aspect of what games are capable of. And not only that, but the idea that story and interactivity are inherently conflicted. John Blow has a really spectacular lecture about how there are a bunch of conflicts between story and gameplay. That you should just listen to his lecture because he's way smarter than I am. And there's truth to both of those arguments, like complete truth. Because if you play a game like Dwarf Fortress, which could never be a movie ever, because it's all procedural generation, it's all about story, player-created story. And if you read, like Boat Murdered, the story of what happened to Boat Murdered, this one Dwarf Fortress that was created by the Something Awful guys. There's a magic to that player-driven story that can't be replicated in any other medium. And Brave is all about mechanical metaphors and sort of understanding the universe through play and stuff like that. And Jason Rohr's Sleep is Death is about player-on-player storytelling. And these are things that can't ever be replicated in movies or any other medium. And there's something that only games are capable of, obviously, only games are capable of. But at the same time, you can talk to me about the fact that these are the ways, that these are things that only games can do, but at the same time, it's not going to change the fact that when I play Silent Hill 2, I am more terrified of Pyramid Head than I am any, evil character, evil force in a film, because Pyramid Head isn't just chasing some woman up on a screen, he's chasing after me. My interactivity alone is making that experience much more powerful, much more terrifying than it would be if I were just watching it as a movie. And similarly, the affection I have for the character like Agro, the horse from Shadow of the Colossus, or a Solid Snake, is an affection that I don't share for any other sort of fictional character I've seen in non-linear, in linear, narrative media, with certain exceptions like the Doctor or whatever. But there's just something to be said for that. And if we agree that video games have this worth, then you can talk to me about Chekhov's gun and the player as an agent of chaos and the way that story is conflicted with gameplay, until the cows come home. And that's true, and those are good points, but it won't change the fact that there are many gamers worldwide, myself included, who would strangle a grandma in one hand and a kitten in the other if it meant that we got to play Half-Life Episode 3 tomorrow. So we admit that those games have some sort of inherent value, just via the player's interactivity, and we have to look at what makes a good story. And when you look at what makes a good story, a lot of that comes down to character development, not everything, but this talk can only be not 7 hours long. And so if we look at character development like in linear media, you look at a character in a work like Fargo or There Will Be Blood or Taxi Driver, and you find the character interesting because of the things they do, who they are, the decisions they make, and stuff like that. You may not like them, but that's okay because you're just watching it passively. And sort of conversely, if you're playing a game and you're trying to get to know another character, an NPC, let's say, games, even at their most cinematic, even when it's Metal Gear Solid, you're sitting through 20 minutes of cutscenes, are still inherently about goals. You want to get to the end and defeat all the bad guys. You want to beat this level and whatever. So I would argue that even more so, more important necessarily than really good writing or making sure the character behaves realistically according to their animations, is that they are useful to the player in achieving that ultimate goal, and in a way that doesn't infringe upon their agency. So this is Yorda from Ico, the PS2 game that everyone should play. And a lot of people really like Yorda because she's very pretty, she's very well animated. You got to hold her by the hand and drag her around, and it gives you this sort of paternal relationship with her. But at the same time, a lot of people fucking hate Yorda, and not just like dislike Yorda, but like actively hate her. And the reason for that is because you can go and do all these things, but you need Yorda to open these certain doors and stuff like that. So you got to keep dragging the dumb bitch along, and when she won't come, you got to go, Opa! That's the noise he makes. And you hear that 100,000 times, Opa! Before she fucking shows up. And when she finally shows up, you might think that you're done with the puzzle, but no, you're not, because you got to go back and get that dumb bitch and then grab her and then bring her all the way back to where you were. And so her existence becomes a hassle. It becomes an infringement on your agency and the kind of things you want to do. And for some people really liked her. I initially really liked her, and I played it recently, and now I don't like her anymore. But you can contrast that against a character like Alex Vance from the Half-Life games. Alex Vance is well written, and she's kind of an interesting character from the story angle. But more importantly, she doesn't infringe on the player's agency. She will support you all the time. She's really good at fighting antlions. You don't have to worry about taking care of Alex. You could remove Alex Vance from Half-Life 2, and Half-Life 2 would still pretty much be the same game. It would just be a little bit less fun to fight antlions because she'll like kick them over and then you can shoot them over. Or no, you can kick them over and she shoots them. Whatever. But the thing about the Alex Vance is that in Half-Life Episode 1, there was a little commentary note that had this quote, and I'm going to read it to you. To convey a sense of urgency, we originally designed Alex to nag the player pretty frequently. She'd say things like, hurry up and keep moving. Whether or not this created a sense of urgency is debatable. But after about 3 minutes of this, the one thing it definitely did was make the player hate Alex. This is one of the observations that eventually led us to switch Alex from generally leading players to almost always following. Through playtesting, we discovered that players much prefer to set the pace themselves, and that they especially dislike virtually any hint of bossiness from Alex. Now, if you're coming at you can come at this from a pretty sort of cynical angle, and it may sound like the player will never care about a character unless they're this stupid, fawning person who approves of everything the player does, and is just there to say, oh, you're so awesome, you're so awesome. And that's not entirely true, because if you look at games like Mass Effect or Dragon Age Bioware, Rex and Morgan are characters that I personally like, a lot of players seem to personally like, who actually fight back against the player a lot just in terms of dialogue and narrative stuff. You know, they'll disagree with the player constantly, they'll chide them for making certain decisions. If you don't, you know, drown a kitten when you have the option, Morgan will say that you're a pussy or whatever. But when it comes to the gameplay, when it comes to your expression of your agency, they're always there to help. They have really useful, you know, spells or weapons or attacks or whatever. So you go to like them just through their empathy. And the interesting about that is that if a player's, sorry, they're useless, I don't know why I said they're empathy. But the interesting about that is that if an NPC's usefulness is in diametric opposition to like their personality and what the scripted story says you could feel, in some cases their usefulness will win out for certain players. So in Far Cry 2, I'm going to spoil this. In Far Cry 2, there are these buddies that you get for the entire game, and they will help you do a bunch of different stuff, and basically give you, you know, neat items for completing objectives that they have in mind, and they'll revive you when you're about to die. But at the end of the game, all of your remaining living buddies will, due to a scripted sequence, all betray you, turn on you, and try to kill you. Now, I was talking to Michael Todd, the developer of Broken Brothers. If you've played that indie game, it's really good. You should play it. Michael Todd was saying that he had grown to like these characters so much just due to their usefulness, the fact that they would resuscitate him whenever, you know, he fell down. He grew to like them so much that he actually couldn't bring himself to kill them when all of them turned on him and started shooting at him. He liked them so much that instead of killing them, he would try to wound them and then wanted to run up and then heal them and then run away as they were getting back up because he knew they would start shooting at him again. That's how much he liked them. Now conversely, you know, I didn't do that. I killed them immediately. But and there's something to be said, and it's not simply a matter of like that's the only thing that matters. That's the only way we can convey, you know, player empathy or whatever, or elicit player empathy rather. It's that the closeness you can feel to Alex Vance or to the Far Cry buddies or to, you know, anybody, any NPC character you really care about who's useful to you, it's a different kind of empathy than what you have for a character in a movie or a character in a book. It's like they feel almost kind of like, I try not to take this in a sad LARPing kind of way, but it's like almost like your buddies in this sort of weird way. They're kind of like your friends. You feel more personally attached to them. But you know what? Fuck Alex Vance. How about I forget everything I said about Alex Vance, because she's well written and she's well animated. She's got a nice voice actress, and so for all these narrative reasons you can like her, and that makes it easy to like. But what if we just took away everything except for her basic gameplay usefulness? What if she was just this big walking pile of usefulness that was only there to help you solve puzzles? Would you still care about it then? Of course you fucking would, because that's the way the companions do. And everybody loves the companion do that. I mean, you hear stories about people spending 30 minutes at that part of Portal trying not to incinerate the way the companion do. Just because they liked it so much, just because it's this thing that helps you through that entire room that you're in, and you know it has no personality obviously, but that people were actually spending half an hour not trying to fucking incinerate a goddamn cube. It's a hunk of metal. It doesn't even have, you know, voice acting. So I think that would prove that, you know, usefulness alone is maybe enough to make a player empathize with their character. But there's another reason that those characters work as well as they do, and that's because you meet those characters or those cubes at the same time that your avatar meets those characters. You know, you meet Alex at the same time Gordon meets Alex in Half-Life. You meet the cube at the same time Shell meets the cube in Portal. The same thing with Far Cry 2. But like 70%, and that's a number I'm completely pulling out of my ass, so don't pay any credence to it. But you know, the majority of story-driven games are actually sort of based on this old this old linear medium idea of what characterization is, which is to say, you know, the game of the Saboteur starts up, and this main character, Sean Devlin, his best friend gets killed in front of him by this Nazi, and the rest of the game is in this narrative frame of, okay, go and avenge your friend. Except he's not my friend. Like, he's some guy I saw for 5 minutes, and then he got shot, and he's not my best friend, so I'm not really going to feel that intensity going after him. And every time that I'm going to kill Nazis, because it's fucking fun to kill Nazis, but I'm only going to kill them because it's fun, not because it's, you know, some sort of big revenge quest for me. And every time that the game tries to pretend like I'm actually out avenging someone and that all my emotions should be based on, you know, righting and wrong, it's kind of like being a trophy wife and having to explain to your husband that you're with him for love and not money. There's a really awkward dissonance there that both you and he are sort of aware of, but nobody wants to admit. And it's even worse when a game wants you to sort of make